So not only is it reliable, but it's also simple enough that you or a shop that you like to go to can probably figure out how to work on it even if they're not really a specialty shop. But I'm going to add an asterisk here because they can work on it if their lift is low enough. Which brings me to my next point, is that this is actually a very small car. It is like deceptively small. I always loved the Viper growing up, and looking at the proportions, I always assumed it was a huge vehicle because, you know, it's got this big V10 with these huge meaty tires, and it just looks large in photos. And I think the C6 Z06 Corvettes kind of share this same thing where they look a lot bigger in photos than they actually are. But the C6 Z06 and the Viper are actually very similar in size. So the Viper only has like 5.1 inches of ground clearance. It is extremely low. You need a low profile jack to work on it. So in a lot of the videos that I've posted where I'm working on the car, a lot of times I have to drive it up onto wood blocks before I can even fit a jack underneath it. I've since bought a super low profile jack, so that's not as much of an issue anymore. But especially if you have a normal height jack, it is never going to fit under this car. Just give up on that pipe dream right now and plan on buying a different jack if you get one of these. This thing is also a lot shorter lengthwise and height-wise than I expected as well. For a point of reference, a 2004 Honda Civic, like this one here, is within 0.2 inches of overall length of the Dodge Viper. 0.2, and the Dodge Viper has a V10. Think about how absurd that is. The C6 Z06 is about the same length as well. They're also about the same height. The roofline on both of them is about 9 inches shorter than the same Honda Civic, but the Dodge Viper is 20 inches wider than the Honda Civic. It is a full foot wider than the C6 Z06 Corvette. So it is a low, short car, but it is absurdly wide. And I was actually concerned the first time I pulled it into my garage because my garage is wide for a one bay. I can normally fit my car and my motorcycle side by side. I didn't know if I would have enough room to pull next to my motorcycle the first time I pulled the Viper in. It was a little bit nerve-wracking. And again, just as a point of reference, it's 10 inches wider than a BMW X5, which is, in my mind, a fairly large SUV. Again, just as a point of reference that you might know. The overall height of the highest point of the car is like 47.5 inches off the ground. So it's less than 4 feet tall. So like if I stand up, it's like this tall is the roof. It's like just over my hip. It's absurd. It's ridiculous, and I absolutely love it. Now, one thing that really concerned me, especially with this being such a low car, is that I was going to scrape on absolutely everything everywhere. My 2002 WRX was lowered on coilovers. That scraped on everything. Everyone who's lived that life knows you have to be really careful with your approach angle anytime you go over a bump or into a driveway or across a road or over a pothole or over a child. But the approach angle of the Viper, which is the angle between the edge of the front tire and the edge of the front bumper, is actually pretty good. It's a lot better than I thought it would be. And it actually does not scrape that much because the overhang of the front bumper relative to the front tires is actually not that bad. One of my good friends had a C6 Z06 and he scraped on absolutely everything because the nose on the Corvette hangs out past the front tires a lot farther than what the Viper does. So that was actually a pleasant surprise. It scrapes a lot less than I thought it would, but that said, it's still not perfect, and the entire underside of my front nose is still scraped up from the previous owner. So don't go barreling into objects thinking that you're going to clear them simply because you watched this one video. But the less pleasant surprise is that because this car is small, even though it's absurdly wide, that doesn't translate to you getting good usable interior space. The cabin on this car is super tight. The door sills are super wide, and you have to step way over and then like down into it, which is kind of cool from like a seating position because you're so low and it's got that long hood, and I really enjoy that. But it's a pain in the butt to get in and out of, and if you're claustrophobic, you're probably not going to like this car. The Gen 3 being a convertible only, I think alleviates a lot of the headspace issues that you get with the coupe because the coupe has very little head clearance from what I'm told. That said, coupes are way out of my budget, so it wasn't really a problem for me to consider. But even with the open top, it is still relatively cramped in the sense that you don't have a lot of wiggle room on the inside. So for example, I've said on this channel previously that I've had a really bad head and neck injury, and my neck and shoulder kind of suffered as a result of that. So when I drive, I kind of need to stretch out every now and then and like move my shoulder around a little bit. The Viper is very well laid out with the space that it has, but there just isn't a lot of space. So when I'm in a normal driving position, there's like a cutout in the door card, and it's perfectly placed for anywhere your arm would be while you're driving the car. But the second that you go to lift your arm to like stretch out, you're gonna immediately hit the car. So when I'm driving, it's perfect, but the second I go to stretch, I lift it up and I clip the door card every single time because there's no space above it. It's the very tight, low cockpit feel. I kind of like it from a driving perspective, but just know that it's not for everyone. So if you don't like that type of thing, don't get this car. That's what it comes down to. But as I just said, I think the space that they do have, they did a very good job laying everything out. And I think they very meticulously planned the placement of everything, because everything from a driving perspective is placed just right. Like I said, when your hands are on the wheel, my elbow never hits the door or anything like that. As you'll probably find out in other videos, the pedals are offset a little bit to accommodate the transmission, but it's not by enough that I actually noticed it until someone pointed it out to me. And in the video series I made about the other cars I looked at before I bought the Viper, I talked about how I drove a Lotus Elise, and that how to shift it, I had to do like a chicken leg thing and like lift my leg up awkwardly between the steering wheel and the door card. And it's because I had this weird sideways uncomfortable angle that it was absolutely miserable. But on the Viper, with where the pedals are placed, when I go up to hit the clutch, it's like a perfectly natural position for my leg to go right between the door card and the wheel. So not only do I think I have more space there than I did on the Elise, it also just doesn't feel like I'm unnaturally contorting myself to hit that space. It's like where my leg actually wants to go. The shifter placement's also perfect. It's right off the wheel. It's at the perfect height. I gotta say, I think the engineers at Dodge put a lot of effort into these ergonomic considerations so that you could use this car and have everything exactly where you needed it to be and have just the right amount of space in all the right places, so that nothing was a nuisance for you. My only gripe, and I mean literally my only gripe, and I know this is being nitpicky, is that the clutch pedal itself is just physically high up. So I have to go like an inch or so higher than I think I should have to go, so that when I'm moving over to get onto the clutch pedal, I almost clip the side of it at first before I remember, oh yeah, it's this high up. And there could be a way to adjust that. I only did a quick Google search. I didn't really find anything. I haven't really looked into it that much. And the reason I haven't looked into it that much is because, like I said, this is a super nitpicky complaint. And because everything is just angled and positioned so well, it's really not that bad to deal with anyhow. The only other thing I could complain about is like the interior quality, but again, I didn't buy this car to be a luxury car. I bought it to be a raw driver's car. So plastic buttons really don't affect my driving experience that much. Clutch placement does, but again, it's really not that bad, and that's me trying to find something to complain about. Another problem with this being such a tight car internally, and obviously with it being a convertible and it being a raw, unfiltered, loud sports car, is that it is atrocious for things like content creation. So I haven't posted a lot of videos from the inside of the Viper other than like reaction videos and stuff. And that's because I've done a lot of time playing around with camera angles and stuff within the Viper. But with how the windshield is positioned versus how tall I am, to mount the camera and to have it actually go down below the roof bar, it's got this like unflattering upward angle from like below my chin. I got that sweet double chin look going and everything, but then also being a convertible top or having the top down, you get a lot of wind noise. And then obviously the engine and the exhaust themselves are quite loud. So if you're trying to buy this car to like flex on people and show off and create content, this is not the car to do that with. Which again, I'm fine with. I bought this car to enjoy the driving experience with. Content creation with it is like my side hobby as an added bonus, but it is so good at like the driving aspect and the enjoyment aspect that I'm easily willing to write off the fact that I can't get a good camera angle when I'm inside the car. So with that, let's move on to the driving experience.